We're going to talk. We've all been very inspired, and we've been encouraged, and we've been motivated, so we're not going to do any more of that. I'm going to do what I love to do the most, besides play the piano, and I'm going to teach you leadership. Now, what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes is the nuts and bolts stuff. And you know this as well as I do. I don't care what you've learned, and we've heard, I mean, good grief. It's just unbelievable. We just drank from a fire hydrant. But here's what you know as well as I do. You're going to take all these cool notes and all the stuff you did on with your thumbs and with your fingers and writing all the deal, and you're going to take the whole thing back into your organization, to your church, to your youth ministry, whatever it might be, and you're going to take all this information into a current system. And your current system has the potential, as it has many times, to crush your enthusiasm and to wring out of you all the inspiration and to make your cool ideas and all these new insights, make them look totally irrelevant. And you're going to show up by yourself or with 2 or 3 of your team members, and you're going to share your cool story in the staff meeting or in your organization, and they're just going to look at you and you're going to think, why aren't you as excited about this as I am? And it's because they're part of your current system. So for the next few minutes, I want to talk about systems. Now, this is not fun, and this isn't inspirational, but I'm just telling you, and most of you are intuitive enough to know, that this is the nuts and bolts stuff. This is the stuff we have to learn to deal with as leaders, and especially, I think, as church leaders. Now, every once in a while, I'm criticized. And by the way, I kind of like, some people like conflict, some people avoid it. I like it too much. I don't know where I got that. Maybe it's being a preacher's kid. But every once in a while, I'm confronted or challenged, and I love this, on the fact that our church, North Point, and what we're doing is too corporate, and we're just trying to take business models and apply them to the church, and God is spiritual, and business is not spiritual, and it's evil, and all that stuff. And I love to say, well, you know what? McDonald's and Coca-Cola have done pretty well with their Great Commission, right? So don't be so overtly critical and so quick to judge, because what I want to talk about for a few minutes is one of those things when I talk about people say, well, that's not spiritual. I mean, you're talking about systems. What about the spiritual side of things? So I just want to kind of head it off at the pass for just a minute. Did you know that before God created man, and fill in this blank for me, he created, and this is what we call it, he created the solar system. That when God created man and created the physical body, he created the most sophisticated system. Your body, and you know this, your body is so incredibly sophisticated that it's taken centuries and centuries for people who pay attention to that kind of stuff to figure it out. And because your body is a system, now I don't know that I explained this very well, because your body is a system, going to the doctor is meaningful. The reason going to the doctor when you're sick is meaningful is because your doctor understands how your body is supposed to be working, and whether it's a chemical thing, a blood thing, a foreign body thing, whatever it might be, your doctor, a good doctor, is able to say, based on how we know this system is supposed to work, we can tweak some things in you physically and make you healthy again. This is why when you get sick, you don't just pray. Because, there's a systems issue, and somebody understands your physical body and your system. The same is true of every kind of system. Whether it's any part of nature, all of nature runs according to systems, including the solar system. God created systems, and he runs the universe through systems. So this is not an unspiritual, purely business approach to organization or leadership. This is a God thing. And your organization and your church is a conglomeration and a combination of multiple systems. And if you don't approach problem solving in your business or in your church systemically or systematically, you'll spend the rest of your career blaming people, firing people, being critical of human nature, and never getting to the root of what's wrong in your organization. Now, I'm just telling you, and I know this from personal experience, and again, many of you could stand up and tell your own story. When you go back to church or back to your business or back to whatever you're going back to with these new ideas, and you probably take notes at a conference like this like I do. I take notes of what the speaker is saying, and then I have another list of all the ideas I get while the speaker's talking. Do you do that? Don't you do that? That's what leaders do. And finally somebody's saying, what are you writing over there? Shh, I got an idea. Aren't you listening? No, I quit listening 10 minutes ago. I heard what I need to hear. I got an idea. In fact, I want to leave now. I mean, some of you just kind of checked out halfway through some of the talks because oh my gosh, that's a great idea I just got at Catalyst Conference. And you're going to go running home like we all do, because I got a list. I got my list from the conference. And we run home, and we're so excited about implementing these things. And ideas don't seem to stick, do they? In fact, you're thinking of last year's conference or another conference you went to this year, and you're thinking, why is it my organization is no further along? Why is it my church hasn't changed any more than it has with all these new ideas? And we read the books, and here's why. Because if you don't learn to address things at the systems level, nothing changes. Now, I'm going to try to build my case as we go through these notes, and then I'm going to give you an exercise, and I'm very excited about this. We just did this with our staff, and it was so helpful, and we're going to continue to do this. I want to give you a very, very practical exercise at the end that you can go home and begin doing some of these things as you think about implementing change in your organization. So I hope that's worth fighting the traffic for. So if you have your notes, we'll fill in a few blanks, and then I'll kind of talk about some of this stuff as we go along. Number one under introduction, there are organizational systems that are conducive to ministry, and I'm talking out of my context, which is a ministry context, and if you're in business, you can make the transition. You know how to do that. There are organizational systems that are conducive to ministry and organizational systems that impede ministry. Isn't that true? There are organizational systems that make ministry or business easy, and there are systems that make you feel like you're treading through quicksand. Everybody's trying to get to the same place, but it's just so hard to get there. Number two, there are organizational systems that free leaders to lead, and there are organizational systems that obstruct leaders. If you're here today and you feel like an obstructed leader, could I just see your hand? Yeah, you got the energy, you got the horsepower, you got the ideas, you got the vision, and you show up in a board meeting or show up in a deacon's meeting or an elders meeting or a staff meeting or whatever it is, and it's just like, how come we can't get any of this going? Everybody's nodding like, yeah, this is a great idea, but there's no traction. It's like running on ice, and it's not because you're not with good people. It's not because these people you work with don't love Jesus, but you're in a system that is anti-progress. You may be working in a system, as we're going to see in a minute, that's anti-leadership. At the below that, I gave you a definition kind of when I talk about system, here's what I'm talking about. This is a very simplified definition. This is not a full-blown definition, but you're smart enough to know what we're talking about. But just for the sake of definition, define a system is your organization's approach to getting things done. Your organization's approach to getting things done. In other words, this is how you do things around the office. This is how you do things in your ministry and business. And let me tell you once again why this is so important. Listen, if you're a youth pastor and you're one of those men or women, you think one day I'm not always going to work with students, one day I'm going to get to work with adults, and you look around your church and you think like I used to think, boy, when I'm in charge, one day, someday, right? Well, here's the deal. With all the ideas and all the energy and all the vision that you have as a student pastor, if you go into an existing system, and many of you who are senior pastors, this is exactly what happened to you. If you go into an existing system with all the creativity and all the energy of youth ministry, and you don't know that there's a systems issue, you will spend the good years of your life trying to make changes that never seem to stick. Because it's a systems issue, and you think all I need is vision, all I need is energy, all I need is creativity, all I need is a band. And nothing changes. Why? Because you never looked at the systems. Let's talk more about this. Hopefully this will get clearer as we go. Number one, systems, and this is rule number one. In fact, if you just got this one thing and left after this, there's so much packed into this one statement. Roman numeral one, systems, here's why it's so important. Systems create behaviors. Would you just say that with me while you're filling that in? Systems create behaviors. One more time. Systems create behaviors. We just heard a great example of that. Was it 60% of black boys who don't finish high school end up in prison? Why is that? Because they are in family that are the sons or daughters, I guess, or sons of men and women who are incarcerated. I think it's the full statistic. That's because there is a system, a family system in place that creates a certain behavior among boys who grow up in those certain kinds of homes. That's why it's a statistic. That's why it's predictable. That's why it's an issue worth addressing. All of us in student ministry know all about this. Remember, you do like the most amazing series on Wednesday night, or you have the most amazing curriculum for Sunday morning, and you think, boy, we have thoroughly covered that subject, and after hearing these 4 lessons or 6 lessons, I'm sure our students will never, ever, ever again fill in the blank, or they will always and forever fill in the blank. I mean, you've illustrated it, exhausted it, you put music to it, you had a drama, you brought in an ex-somebody. I mean, you just loaded it on. I mean, you've given those kids so much information. And you're sure, I'm telling you, after this series, their lives are changed, right? Like the next week, you see them doing the very thing you spent 4 weeks and $20,000 trying to explain to them not to do, you know? And you're like, what happened? It's real simple. Talks don't create behaviors. Cool environments don't create behaviors. Systems create behaviors. If you're a senior pastor, you've had the same thing happen. You did like the most amazing series on marriage you've ever done. I mean, you read up on everything. You had great illustrations. You had team meetings. You let your wife share some of the secrets of your marriage. You told your story. You were authentic. You were transparent. You had somebody knock it out of the park with a closing song. Everybody cried, threw their stick in the fire, rededicated their lives, held hands, renewed the marriage vows. I mean, everybody wore white that day. I mean, it was just through rice. I mean, it was just like, it was like so over the top. I mean, now the marriages in our church, by golly, we got strong marriages. 2 weeks later, you and your wife are like in a fight, And then you hear about it, some of your best friends struggling, somebody else is getting a divorce. And a year later, you look back, and there's no difference in the marriages in your church. Why? Because preaching, and I hate to admit this, preaching does not create behaviors. Systems create behaviors. The Baptist church is a system. It creates certain behaviors. That's why I can be around somebody about 15 minutes ago. Are you Baptist? And they say, well, brother. And you say, I knew it, right? Hey, you can be around Methodist. And you kind of know. Now, you're not Methodist. You wouldn't have done that, okay? You're not. Just kidding. You're a certain brand of Methodist. You're a catalyst Methodist. That's right. There you go. Or you can be around Presbyterians, and they can't help but be a part of their system. It just kind of goes. Or if I have so many friends who are Catholic. I mean, all my buddies that are kind of my age that are outside of my church circles, I meet through sports and all the stuff in our community. Most of them are Catholic. It's so funny. I start meeting people, I think, I bet they're Catholic. How do I know? You know what? Because religious systems, denominational systems create behaviors. The reason the people in your churches act the way they do is because they've been in a system that has created those kinds of behaviors. In fact, I have, speaking of Methodists, I have a dear friend. I've known 2 people in this category, but one's a really close friend who have very successful Methodist churches, very successful. And this one guy I was able to have this conversation with, I said, what's the deal? Because you don't do anything like Methodist, but you have this big church. He says, well, what we did is we just broke all the rules and do everything different. We've been so successful, they leave us alone. They hold us up as a model in terms of, impacting the community, but they don't want anybody to do what we do because basically we break all the rules. We don't run the game plan. So what did they do? Listen to what they did, church leaders. They decided they wanted a different kind of behavior from their Methodist. So they implemented different systems which created different kinds of behaviors, which, that just blew their church up in a good way. Because systems create and impact behaviors. And all of us that work in church world are working in some sort of system. Most of us inherited it. A few of us willingly adopted it. And then a few of us had the opportunity to actually create it. Letter B. The system that you inherit, adopt, or create will eventually impact. Now, this is so huge. Listen to this. Will eventually impact what staff and volunteers do. The system you inherit, adopt, or create will eventually impact what staff and volunteers do. This is an undercurrent in every one of our organizations. This is a stream that runs below the surface. This is something that's happening right now in your organization. And because we don't understand this, when something goes wrong, we immediately blame people. Well, she's just no good. He's no good. He didn't do what I said. She didn't tell me the truth. He didn't listen to me. She wasn't paying attention. They don't have the vision. But you know what? I would bet 80% of your people problems are not people problems. They are system problems because systems create behaviors. And oftentimes there is such a huge disconnect between mission and vision and systems, and guess which wins? The system. We'll talk about that in just a minute. For example, I gave you some examples from our world. I put invest and invite. One of our core values are basically our whole evangelism strategy at North Point, Buckhead, and Brownsbridge Church, and all of our strategic partners. Our whole evangelism strategy is summed up in these three words: invest and invite. That is, you invest your life in the life of an unbeliever, and at the appropriate time, you invite them to an environment where they will hear the gospel. That's it. That's our whole thing. Invest and invite, invest and invite. And one of the invest and invite destinations for us is our worship service on Sunday morning. Our people just invite people all the time. So church leaders will come and they say, Andy, listen to the question. How do you get people to invite their friends to church? How do you get people to invite their friends to church? My people won't invite people. Your people are better than my people. How do I get my people to be like your people? To which I always say, first of all, I don't have any people, okay? I don't even like that terminology. I don't have people. But the whole thing is, wait a minute, why is it that your people invite people to church and I can't get my people? Andy, how can I get my people to invite people to church? Well, I'll tell you how you don't do it. You've all tried this, right? You don't get up and say, now look, you need to invite your friends to church, okay? I told them, God, I told those people, God, take me to a different church where the people love you. You know how I've tried to get these people to be obedient and tell their friends about Jesus. God, I told them and I told them and I told them. What's wrong with these people? Nothing wrong with the people. Let me tell you about your church. I've never been there. Let me tell you all about it. If people, this is simple. This is hard. It's hard to do, simple to understand. If people in your church don't invite their unchurched friends to church, it's because you have a system that has not created that kind of behavior. An announcement won't get it done. A video won't get it done. A sad story won't get it done. You've got to create a system that creates the behavior of inviting unchurched people to church. In fact, it's interesting. Monday, this is a crazy week for me. Monday, I'm taking our leadership team off for a couple days. And for 2 days, we're going to discuss the guest experience at North Point, Brownsbridge, and Buckhead Church. That's what we're going to do for 2 days. We're going to just discuss, take apart, tear apart, look at our systems and ask, what's going on with our guest experience? You talk about a great discussion. You should have this. How can we make our guest experience better? Because you know what we've discovered? If you have a great guest experience, which is a combination of systems, parking, hallways, signage, leadership, all that kind of stuff, if you have a system that creates a great guest experience, guess what your people do? They invite guests. There's a thought. You see, I'm telling you, the reason people invite people to our services, we've created systems that generate that kind of behavior. I don't think I've ever in 12 years stood up and said, now look, you guys, you need to invite your friends. What's wrong with you? Don't you have any lost friends? You just don't have to do that. Okay, look, second illustration, I know I got to move along, is groups. This is amazing. I just found out this week that one of my good friends stood up in a conference and said that groups, talking about adult small groups, that groups don't work. Groups don't work. Here's what I thought. Groups don't work in your church. Groups don't work in your church because you don't have a system that creates a group's mentality. Pastors say, Andy, how do you get your adults to go into homes during the week? And then I hear this, and maybe you've heard it or said it, and this just drives me crazy. Our people won't do that. Like they're from a different country. Our people, these are people in the same city as us. Like we have this group where everybody has a number, and the number determines where you go to church, and you have to go there. Those are your people, these are mine. Our people won't do that. How do you get people to go be a part of a small group? It's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. You create systems that create that kind of behavior. That's what you do. And here's the good news. You can do that. You can create those kinds of systems. I'm going to give you a clue a little bit later on how to do that. Other illustrations, volunteers. I mean, all of us need more volunteers, right? How do you get volunteers? And people always ask, how do you get so many volunteers? I love this one. How do you get men to teach children? How do you get teenagers to serve on Sunday morning? My son's 15 years old. I just love this. And Reggie, I just give the credit of all this to Reggie Joyner. He created all these incredible children's systems in our church. And again, you need to go to the Orange Conference because that's where he talks about how do you create these systems and tweak the systems in your church. But he created this incredible system, and part of it is a system called Student Impact, where our high school students serve on Sunday morning instead of going to Sunday school. My 15-year-old teaches a group with first graders. Him and his buddy, they're both 15 in the 9th grade, teach first graders on Sunday morning, and they don't want to miss. In fact, tonight they're going to this big event at church where all their small groups are coming together. He's 15 years old. He can't wait. He's in the 9th grade. He's very normal. He can't wait to go and be a part of this event. Now, how do you get your 9th graders to want to be serving children? How do you get your men? Hey, the answer is simple. You create a system that creates that kind of behavior among people. You say, oh, Andy, you're not really answering the question. Yes, I am, because your temptation will be to go home and fire your children's director. Because you're not getting it done. Your temptation will be to go home and get your student pastor and say, look, I heard Andy talk about this deal. Go find out what they're doing at North Point, and you do that. I want to see these children. No, that's not how you do it. You step way, way back, and you have a discussion about, I'm going to tell you how in just a minute. You have a big, broad discussion about what are we doing to create the kinds of behaviors we want? And here's a better question. We'll get to it in a minute as well. What are we doing that generates the kind of behaviors we're asking people not to participate in? Keep going. Anytime you hear, I think this is in your notes. Anytime you hear, well, our people just won't, you're listening to someone who doesn't understand the influence of systems. Our people just aren't committed. No, you just haven't captured their commitment. Our people just won't worship. No, you just haven't created a system conducive to worship. Our people won't serve. No, you just haven't created a context that just drives them and motivates them to serve. Letter D, components of a system. The best way to understand this, I don't think this is in your notes. If you just write the word family, it's easy to understand what a system is, because all of you live in a system. It's a family system. And the best way to understand systems organizationally is to think family. For example, here's 5, there's more than this. Here's the kind of the key or critical components of any system. Number 1 are expectations, or the rules, expectations. You fill in that blank. 2 is rewards or lack of. In your organization, certain things are rewarded, certain things are punished, and certain things are neglected. Number 3, consequences or the lack of. In your organization, there are consequences for certain things, and there are no consequences for other things. Those kinds of things impact the system, whether they're obvious or not. Number 4, the communication. There's a communication, style and content, in terms of how are things communicated. I'm not talking about the communicator. I'm talking about within your organization in terms of how do you do things. There is a way that information is communicated, and there's a style in which it's communicated that shapes your system. Then number 5, the behavior or the behavioral patterns of the people in charge. The behavior of the behavioral patterns of the people in charge. I wrote in my notes, I guess this is a good idea. If you would like a starting point, I'm going to give you a better exercise in a minute, but if you'd like a starting point for this discussion, maybe in the van ride home or for the next 3 hours while you're sitting in traffic, you can go ahead and start this conversation, get some folks on the cell phone. Here's a great conversation to have with your staff. Look at those 5 things and answer the question. What are the expectations in our organization? What are the clear expectations? This is huge. You listening? Senior pastors, listen up. What do we reward in our organization? Here's a principle for you. What's rewarded is repeated. What's rewarded is repeated. I don't care what you ask people to do, they will do what you reward. I don't care what you command people to do, I don't care what's in your policy handbook. What's rewarded is repeated. One of the things you need to understand about your organization, both with volunteers and staff, is what are we intentionally or what are we unintentionally rewarding? Because that is shaping the culture and the system of your organization. The consequences, the communication, the behavior of those in charge. Letter E, systems have a greater impact on organizational culture than do mission statements. I'm all for mission statements. Systems trump mission statements 100% of the time, because your mission statement is hanging on the wall. Your systems are happening down the hall. What's happening down the hall trumps what's hanging on the wall every single time. And you know what? You need to have a mission statement. But here's another staff retreat to have. How do we align the behaviors of the staff with the mission? And the answer isn't to fire the staff and get better people. You've already got great people. You know what they're doing? There's another thing I know about your church, okay? Your staff is doing exactly what you have led and rewarded them to do. That's what your staff is doing. They're doing exactly what you have led and rewarded them to do. And if you've led them to do something intentionally or unintentionally, or if you've rewarded them in such a way that they're doing something that you don't want them to do, the problem is in the mirror. The problem isn't in the people that you've hired. But our first line of response when things don't go well is to blame people. Most of the time, it's not people. It's a system. If you're, again, the best way to think of it is in terms of family. We had this issue at home. My kids don't have many chores. One of them's to take the garbage can down to the street. Whoa, Okay, our driveway is about 220 feet long. We live way off the street, So that's not like an easy thing, and it's kind of a hill. So they're supposed to be out there Thursday night, so what do? We go into this routine. Have y'all taken the trash cans down? No. You got to take the trash? No. We have this. I don't want to have this conversation. So now what have I done? I remind them, they take it down. I remind them, they take it down. I remind them, I take it down. They take it down, take the trash down. And then I sit alone going, what's wrong with these kids? I have to remind them. Don't they understand how God's blessed them to put them in a family like this one, and we are so good to them, and they got everything they want, and they got iPods, and they got, these ungrateful kids. If they really love me and love Jesus, I wouldn't have to remind them. They would just wake up in the morning and say, oh, what a privilege. We get to take that trash down to the street. These kids, I'm trading them in. I'm going to get some good kids. Do you know why they only take the trash down after I remind them? Because that's the system I created. If you were to ask one of my kids, hey, how does the chore thing work? Oh, here's how it goes. My dad asked us once. We pretty much ignore that. Then he asked us a second time. We pretty much ignore that. Then he starts to get mad, and then we take the trash down. That's how it works in our family. Well, who created that incredible system? Oh, Dad came up with that himself, all by himself. We just follow along. That's how we do it in our home. Now you laugh. There's 100 examples of that in your organization. You're so frustrated with her. She's doing exactly what you led and rewarded her to do because you're the boss. So you know what we did at home? I finally said, all right, guys, we're changing the system. Here's how it works. Well, here's what I did. I drove home one day. Trash wasn't down. I thought, okay, systems problem. I'm blaming boys. I'm blaming some people, and then I'm making the second mistake. Then I'm blaming human nature. First of all, it's like my boys. There's something wrong with my boys. Second line of defense. Well, they're teenagers. That's just how teenagers are. So that's what you do. You blame people or you blame human nature. And I realized that, come on, Andy, you're smarter than that. It's a systems thing. So I went up, parked the car, got the trash cans, took the first trash can down. Walked all the way back up the driveway, got the second trash can, taking it down. Andrew comes in and says, what are you doing? I said, I'm taking trash down. Well, thanks. Not a problem. Happy to do it. I get your allowance. It's not a problem, Andrew, really. It's good. It's at dinner that night. He said, were you serious about the allowance thing? I said, oh, yeah, Garrett, you and Andrew, I got your allowance. Andrew, you pay me this week. I get their allowance. In fact, I'm going to get your allowance. Every week I do your chores. Not a problem. You don't ever have to take the trash down again if you don't want. It's not an issue. Problem solved. I don't have to ask, wait. I'm not a brilliant parent. It took me like 4 years to figure that out, Here's my point. Listen. Somewhere in your organization with volunteers and staff, you are accidentally rewarding the wrong thing, and then you're complaining about it when they act on what you reward. And I'm telling you, you can't sit here and solve this. This is not a commitment you make. This isn't, I'm so glad I learned that. No. These are big, bold, hairy, long, multi-day discussions you have as a staff. Changing systems organizationally is very, very difficult. But listen, nothing changes unless you deal with change at this level. Number one, I don't know where we are. Number one, yeah, there we go. We did this already. Number one, this principle explains why it's so difficult to transition an organization or a church, whatever it is. This is why it's so difficult. Some of you pastors come in, and come on, again, there's so many stories. You come in, you're the new pastor, they're so excited. We have so many problems here. You're going to come change them, and we promise to give you money and buy you a car, and you have freedom. You can do whatever you want to, pastor. We just want change. We want change. And then you come in and start trying to bring about change, and nothing changes. Everywhere you push, there's resistance. Why? Because you've come in with a new mission or vision, but nobody's addressed the systems. Number two, if a new leader cast a new vision and never addresses old systems, nothing changes. Hey, listen, if you're a denominational leader, I hope you're listening. Not because I'm smart and not because I'm talking, but because this is true. And you know this, hundreds, in some cases thousands, in some cases tens of thousands of people who love God and are serving in your churches, and they're trying to run your game plan. And your game plan is broke. And they're trying to be obedient, and they're trying to do the deal, but you've created a system that doesn't create the behaviors they want. And this is why church planning is so in vogue. Come on, I don't blame you. I did it. I didn't have time to fix something. I'm no good at fixing something. It's just easier to go out and create your own problems, right? I mean, I don't want to inherit somebody else's problems. I don't want to go spend 10 years of my life trying to address a system that nobody even can tell me what the system is. This is why people want to plant churches. Who can blame them? I mean, you'd rather have 2 jobs. You'd rather live in a smaller house and drive an older car. But at least at the end of the day, you get to create your own systems. But you know what? If you're in a position of leadership denominationally, or you have influence within a denomination, listen, this is such a passion. One of the greatest things you could do for the next generation of church leaders is to be bold and to be courageous and to say it's broke, it doesn't work, it sucks, it needs to be changed, and to just spend this next season of your life creating the kinds of systems that allow leaders to lead. And I'll make you a promise. You create a context in which leaders are free to lead, and guess who flock? Leaders. Because leaders want to lead, and we have very little patience with systems that won't allow us to lead. We either rebel and get out of the ministry, or we go our own way and do something different. And you know what? I thank you, sir. I appreciate that. You know what? Listen. I got to get back to the notes. Listen. No, listen. I know. We don't want to waste our life, right? We don't want to waste time. And there's some of you in this room, you have so much influence. And if you would just be a little bolder, a little more courageous, if you would just leverage your influence a little bit more, you might create some space and some margin for the leaders who are dying to make a difference in this world. But they are not going to waste their time in life doing stuff that doesn't work, or waste their time in life trying to fix things that people don't want fixed. Number 2, Roman numeral 2, the New Testament, you know this, the New Testament does not present us with a comprehensive system or model. I guess you know this, you should know this. The New Testament does not present us with a comprehensive system or model. In the New Testament, we discover what the early church did. That's all we do there. We discover what the early church did. The New Testament does not lay out a comprehensive plan instructing church leaders what to do. Now, you may disagree with that, and that's okay. I could be wrong. This is just my opportunity to talk, okay? But this is important. In the New Testament, we don't find out how to do all this. It's a mistake to assume we do, and here's why. And just this little sidebar, little Bible sidebar. In the New Testament, in the first century, they had something we don't have. See, they didn't have to wear WWJD bracelets. They just went and said, hey, Peter, what would Jesus do? And they knew, because he was there. He saw him do it, right? Hey, John, what do you think Jesus would do? I'll tell you what he did. I'm standing there. They had the apostles. We don't, now again, you may think you have apostles. You may think you are an apostle, just a little bit different theological bent. The apostles are gone. We've named buildings after them. They are gone. We don't have the apostles. So in terms of how to lead the local church, we have to go a completely different way with a completely different view on leadership. We have the opportunity to create the systems to get the Great Commission fulfilled. The commission doesn't change, the mission doesn't change, the vision doesn't change, but the methodology changes and the systems change. Letter B, always differentiate between what is prescriptive and what is descriptive. Always differentiate between what's prescriptive and descriptive. I'm really fascinated by the home church movement. I think it's cool. I bet we have some leaders here that are involved in the home church, and you're here, kind of learning from this, and I think it's great. Here's what I love to say. I don't get in these conversations much anymore, but I love to have them when I have time and meet people have them. The home church thing, I say, just be careful, because, sometimes not everybody, but the home church thing, and some other trends in our culture and churches, it's let's go back to the New Testament. What did Jesus do? Let's do it let's be a New Testament church. And I go, okay, you got to be really careful with that. You got to be really careful with that. I mean, and we're going to see in a minute, there's all kinds of principles to extract and draw from, but you can't be a first century church. You probably don't need to write this down, because we don't live in the first century. Oh. Now, I'm not being sarcastic, okay? Come on, wait. Listen, you don't want to be a first century church. It was illegal. Okay? You don't want to be a first century church. Of course they met in homes. Where else were they going to meet? Hey, if you want to be a first century church and meet in homes, then you also have to preach in the synagogues. Right? That's how they did it. They met in homes and preached in the synagogues. I've not met anybody yet who says, yeah, we meet in a home and we preach in the synagogues. No, you don't. They're not going to let you in a synagogue to preach. So all I'm saying is this. As you think about the New Testament, and as you think about what we can extract in terms of 21st century model, be careful. Let me give you a list of things that we do find. Letter C, in the New Testament, Old Testament do offer some principles that should be integrated. There are systems. I'll hit these real quick. I'm not going to talk about them. Delegation, that's Old Testament, New Testament. Accountability, Acts 15, Paul goes and says, hey, is it okay? Is it okay if I tell everybody else in the world about Jesus? Well, let's talk about that. We think it's okay. Well, that's great. Say big me, accountability. Authority, Romans 13. Interdependence, Paul's discussion of spiritual gifts. Point leadership, Old Testament, New Testament. You always find a follow me, not a follow we. Number 6, seeking counsel. That's in Proverbs and in Acts 15, seeking counsel. One of the things that I don't find, and maybe you can find it in the scriptures as it relates to church, is congregational rule. It's not in there. In fact, you can find examples of congregational rule in the Bible. I'll give you a couple. A congregation voted to build a golden calf and worship it instead of God. That was a congregational vote, right? A very small body voted to throw their brother into a pit. It was unanimous. Joseph went into the pit. There was a third one I can't remember, but basically all the examples. Then all the people voted in the Old Testament that we don't want to follow a prophet and we want to follow a king. So basically the examples of congregational rule in the scripture all turned out bad that God twisted and made good, but ultimately there's no prescriptive model in the New Testament that says churches are to be ruled or led by congregations. Now, you know what? If you can figure out how to make that work, I don't think it's anti-Bible. It's just not necessarily something that we're instructed to do in the scripture. And my opinion, and it's just my opinion, is that congregations, or churches I should say, that are led by we instead of a me, and I don't mean without accountability, but are led by we instead of me, they're led by congregational rule and all those kinds of things, those are the churches that end up with dysfunctional systems. And I don't have time to explain why I think that is, but that tends to be the trend. Now, real quick, and we'll wrap this up. Number 3, here are some things that I think as you rethink the systems of your church, here are some things I think you should consider making front and center issues. Here's some things that need to be a part of your organizational makeup as you think about recreating systems. Letter A, your system should allow you to involve and hire the best person for the job. You need a system that allows you to hire and involve the best person for the job. I have a friend in a mainline, I won't say the denomination, you'll guess. I have a friend in a mainline church. We've been friends since high school. He's the senior pastor. He cannot hire his own staff. There's a committee that hires his staff. I said, what? Because he's telling me about this lady that's driving him crazy, and she just, I said, well, just fire her. He said, I can't. I said, why? He said, well, this committee hired her, and, she's got a sister-in-law, or I don't know, some kind of deal. She's been there forever. I said, so you're the boss, and you can't let go, and you can't hire and fire? Nope, I'm just telling you. Bad system. It's broken. Leaders hate it. You need a system that allows you to hire and involve the best people for the job. Letter B. Your system should provide you with the flexibility to get the right people to the table. That when you're making a decision, to get the right people to the table, when you're making a decision, you need to have the flexibility in your system to get the right people to the table to make the decision. If you're making a financial decision, you need to have the flexibility to get the smartest financial minds around the table to make that decision. If you're making a personnel decision, you need to have the flexibility to get the right people around the table to help you make personnel decisions. When you're organizing your staff, I highly, highly recommend that you do not put people on your leadership team based on their position in the organization. You create a leadership team based on the best people to be on the leadership team. For example, if currently your student pastor is a part of your leadership team, don't make a rule that says, well, in our church, the student pastor is always on the leadership team. You just make a decision that if the student pastor leaves and you replace that person, you can put anybody on there you want. That nobody has a permanent place at the table based on position. They have a permanent place at the table based on your selection of putting people around the table. You need to have the flexibility. Now, I was raised in a Baptist church. Many of you are Baptists. In the Baptist church, there was the pastor, there was the education director, and who was the other one? The music director. That's right. There was the three people. And this is the thing. No matter how long anybody else had been on staff, if you were the education director or the music director, you were in the top three. Bad system. As a leader, you need to have the flexibility to get who you know needs to be at the table for critical decisions as it relates. That's a systems decision. That's a systems issue. Letter C. See, your system should allow you to make complex decisions within the context of a small group of empowered individuals. Your system should allow you to make complex decisions within the context of a small group of empowered individuals. This is a huge principle. Listen, you cannot, this is a systems thing, you cannot communicate complex information to a whole lot of people accurately. You can't. Every time you add someone to the conversation, the information gets diluted. You need to have a system so that when you're making very, very complicated decisions, you have a handful of people who can comprehend and get their arms around that complicated information in order to make a decision. Now, many of you have done this with your finance committees and different kinds of teams who are able to, work through detailed information. But one of the problems with congregational rule is the person with the microphone always wins, whether they're right or not. Because when you're in front of a lot of people, the most persuasive person is going to sway the crowd, whether they're right or not. So detailed, big, decisions that deal with lots of details, they need to be able to be made with a group of highly informed people who have all the facts. That is a systems issue. That's one of those things that plays into how your organization works. Then letter D, your system should ensure that only one person answers to they. Your system should ensure that only one person answers to they. Nobody wants to answer to they. But in every organization, somebody has to answer to they. Just make sure in your organization only one person has to answer to they. In our organization, I answer to they. There's a group of elders. Right now we have 10 elders. They could call a meeting this afternoon and fire me. I have no recourse. They do not need congregational approval. I helped write the Constitution. I like it that way. That's the they. But if there's any issue in our church, it comes to me. And if there's a problem in the student ministry, the elders don't go to the student pastor, they come to me. They say, Andy, there's an issue. I say, you know what? I'm large and in charge, and I'm responsible. It may not be my fault, but I'm responsible. I'm going to take care of it. You guys can hold me accountable to it. But the people who do children's ministry and music ministry, they don't work through the elders, they work through me. You say, well, Andy, isn't that kind of self-centered? No, this is just how organizations work well. But I'm accountable to they. But you don't want an organization where a bunch of people are accountable to they. to committees and all that sort of stuff. You just need to make sure one person is and that everybody else understands who they report to. Now, here's what I suggest you do with all this. I know this is like tons of information. Some of you are mad. Some of you are going, I wish my pastor was here. Some of you are going, I'm glad my staff's not here to hear this. And so we've got all kinds of reactions. I understand. I covered a lot fast. I wasn't complete. There are lots of gaps. You have lots of questions. So let's just do a quick Q&A. No, I'm just kidding. So here's what that'd be fun. Yes, sir. Where'd you get that? Let me give you a quick assignment, okay? Here's a first step, all right? Here's what I would suggest you do. When you go home or on your way home, depending on the size of your church or organization, I suggest that you get a team of people, either that represents the whole church, or you can do this just with student ministry, children's ministry, music ministry, whatever it might be, but get a group of people together or some groups of people together to answer these questions. The first question is this. This is such a helpful exercise. You ready? Each group needs to list three behaviors that you wish characterized your group. For example, what are three behaviors we would like all the people of North Point to exhibit? What are three behaviors we wish all of our students in student ministry would exhibit? What are three behaviors we wish all of our volunteers to list? Three behaviors. What are three things we really, really, really wish people could do? Maybe it's arrive on time. Maybe it's serve and, to quit not showing up when they're supposed to serve. I don't know, maybe it's tithe. But come up, what are three things that we wish our people did, systematically or consistently? And again, it could be within a division of your organization or overall. Then the second question to answer is this. List one thing that you're doing systematically to encourage each of those behaviors. Then you look at your organization and you ask the question, okay, if this is the behavior we want, what are we doing systematically? Announcements may be part of it, but it can't be just an announcement or, hey, we did a series on that one time. That didn't get it. What are we doing systematically? What are we doing in the rhythm of our organization that motivates people to embrace that kind of behavior? This is a very important discussion to have, because if systems create behaviors and you know the behaviors you want your people to exhibit, whether it's invest and invite or get in small groups or serve on Sunday morning or give more or work in the parking lot or work with the homeless or whatever it might be, if you know the behavior and if a system creates a behavior, then you look at your system and you say, what are we doing that systematically within the life of our organization moves people toward that behavior? And you make a list of those. That will be a very difficult discussion, but listen to me for a second. If there's a behavior that you know you want them to do and you have a hard time identifying anything in your organization that really would elicit that kind of response or behavior, you have a systems problem. You're spending a lot of time and money creating behaviors that aren't the bullseye on the target for your group. Then the third question is this, and this is the real fun one, and this is the one, unfortunately, that is easy to answer. You can guess what it is. List the things that you are doing, maybe inadvertently, to encourage the opposite of the behavior you want to see. What are we doing systematically that encourages the wrong behavior? In other words, in my example with my trash cans, the answer would be, well, I don't make them do it the first time. I don't make them do it the second time. There's really not a consequence for the fact that I ask them over and over and over. I've actually created this behavior. For example, you want your people to show up on time and be there at the beginning of the service, and you discover that you start the service 5 to 10 minutes late every week. You've taught them to be late, and then you complain about it on Monday morning. It's a systems problem. It's not the people problem. It's not the human nature problem. It's a systems problem. So you get a group of people, core leadership, 5 or 6 people is about the most you want in a group like this, and you ask the question divisionally, departmentally, and in terms of the whole church. What are the behaviors we'd like to see our people do? What systematically are we doing to encourage or create those behaviors? And what are we doing accidentally that works against the kind of behavior we want to have? If your services are boring, there's no point in trying to get people to invite them to it. Your people don't even want to be there, right? It's a systems problem. It's not a behavior problem. At the end of your notes, I wrote down this. I had them write this passage. I love this, and we're going to close here. I'll read this to you. We have different gifts according to the grace given us. If a man's gift is prophesying, let him use it in proportion to his faith. If it is serving, let him serve. If it's teaching, let him teach. If it is encouraging, let him encourage. If it's contributing to the needs of others, let him give generously. But if it's leadership, let him govern. What's the word? Come on, what's the word? You know what diligently means? It means to, listen, it means to lean all of your weight into it. So here's your assignment. Here's my assignment for those of us in leadership, especially those of us who've been given, imagine how crazy this is, who've been given the opportunity to lead a local church. Your challenge and mine is not to just kind of lead, it's to lead diligently. And I'm just telling you, if there's going to be change, part of diligent leadership is doing the hard work of systems analysis. Part of the hard work and the diligence of leadership is having these kinds of conversations, looking on the underside of things, discovering the things we don't want to discover, and then having the courage to make the changes necessary. Because you know this, we are a part of what God's doing in the world. And for some crazy reason, in this space of time and in this generation, we've been given the opportunity to serve as leaders. We don't have any time to waste. We don't have any talent to waste. We don't have any breath to waste. So why in the world do we want to continue to churn and churn and churn with things that don't work? So let's be the generation that has the courage, and let's be the generation that takes the time to peel back and to take apart the things that haven't worked and won't ever work, and to implement systems that are conducive to leadership. Because when you create a space where leaders can lead, the leaders flock. And God has given us the gifts of leadership in order to lead his church to the place where he's leading us to lead it. My heart's desire for the local church is that we would, every local church represented here, that we would all lead irresistible ministry environments, that when people wake up in your community, you're the first option on Sunday morning. And for that to happen, we've got to do the difficult job of leadership. And for many of us, it's not about going back and changing the mission and vision, and it's not about going back and applying some cool new principle. It's about going home and asking the questions, what do we want our people to do? What are we doing to support that behavior? And what are we doing to take away from it? And if you'll do that difficult work, your systems will change. And if your systems change, your vision and your mission will become a reality.